So, picture this. I'm 68 years old, finally made that big move by selling the company I started from the ground up for a jaw-dropping $58 million. To celebrate, I decided to take my only son and his wife out to the swankiest restaurant in town. My son seemed genuinely happy, glass raised toasting my big win. But behind that smile, he had other plans. Little did he know, someone else was already watching him, and their simple heads up would set off a whole chain of events aiming to unravel Kevin's world bit by bit. Imagine a restaurant so quiet, the silence almost felt like it had weight. You'd only hear the gentle clink of silverware on pricey plates and the soft whispers of people who knew that great things are discussed in hushed tones. Kevin sat with his wife Brenda across from me, laying it on thick with the "we're so proud of you" routine. Their grins were too wide, their congratulations too sugary. It was like they'd rehearsed a script before getting out of their car. $58 million, Dad, Kevin said, shaking his head in supposed disbelief. He held his wine glass like it was featherlight. Can you even wrap your head around a number like that? It's incredible, a testament to your whole life's work. I just nodded, sipping my cranberry juice slowly. His words were sweet, but I knew the bitter taste of deceit well. For 40 years, I busted my hump building up Callahan Logistics, starting with nothing but an old truck and a burning desire to outdo them all. I started remembering those endless nights with no sleep, the way dirt seemed to embed itself into my hands, and the constant fear that gnawed at me. I built that business on good old-fashioned hard work and honesty, two notions Kevin never quite got. He could see the $58 million, sure, but he was blind to the sacrifices that made it possible. Brenda rested her hand on mine. Her touch was fleeting and cold. We're just so proud of you, Jack. Honestly, it's time for you to kick back. Enjoy what you've worked for. Let us take care of you. That last part, let us take care of you, came off more like a scheme than a genuine offer. I tried to find the little kid who used to ride with me in my old truck, his tiny hand clutching a toy car, in Kevin's face. But that child was long gone. In his place was a grown man with eyes that spoke of unearned comfort. Alicia, my late wife, had seen it coming way back when. She'd stand at the window, sadness in her eyes, after one of Kevin's numerous cash requests. "Be careful, Jack," she'd say. "To him, you're just an ATM, not a father." I used to think she was being too harsh, but now, sitting in this luxury, her words echoed, predicting this very moment. As we chatted, the talk was as empty as a shallow creek of niceties. They asked how I was doing, not sticking around long enough for the answer. They talked about vacations and a brand new car, all with the casual air of someone whose money worries were a thing of the past, spending it in their heads before it even landed in their laps. That old pain tugged at my heart again, the persistent sting of disappointment I couldn't shake where Kevin was concerned. I hoped maybe tonight would be different, that he'd give me some genuine respect. But once again, I was wrong. Instead of a father enjoying a moment with his family, I was a vault they were eager to crack into. After the main course, Kevin got up, his grin spreading. "Brenda, darling," he extended a hand. "They're playing our song. Will you dance with me?" It was an old classic, a slow tune from back in the day, another act in their play to show how wonderfully in love they were. Brenda smiled sweetly and took his hand, and off they went to the small dance floor by the grand piano. They swayed together to the rhythm. From my seat, they looked genuinely happy. But I knew the truth. I'd rescued Kevin from gambling debts 3 times. I'd put my name on their overly extravagant home's mortgage. Their picture-perfect lives were all a delicate facade, bankrolled by yours truly. I turned back to my cranberry juice. The doc had laid it on me at my last checkup. "You've got a strong heart, Jack, but not an invincible one. No more whiskey, Just cranberry juice from now on, a small trade-off for more time. I watched the deep red drink swirling in my glass, listening to the ice gently clinking, feeling content with dreaming about enjoying life. That's when I noticed him, an older gentleman, maybe slightly younger than me, wearing a crisp security uniform, heading straight for my table. He stood tall and sharp, with eyes that didn't miss a thing. He came over with a sort of determined calm, locking eyes with me like he had something crucial to share. Stopping next to where I was sitting, he leaned in, almost like he was about to share a big secret. "Mr. Callahan," he spoke in a deep, steady tone. It was calm, but tinged with urgency. "I'm not here to alarm you," he said, pausing as he glanced towards the dance floor before turning back to me. "While I was at the bar, I noticed your son coming back to your table earlier. He thought no one was watching, but I saw him pour something from a small vial into your juice." In that moment, time seemed to stand still. The piano music faded away, and the sound of clinking glasses vanished. All I could hear was my heart pounding like a drum. I glanced at the man, identifying him as Marcus from his name tag. His face displayed a professional concern, but his eyes showed genuine worry. I could tell he wasn't making this up. I didn't gasp or cause a scene. After all the years spent dealing with tense negotiations and complicated crises, I'd learned to keep my cool. But inside, a wave of cold fear washed over me, like icy water filling my veins. I stared at the glass in my hand, once just an ordinary drink, now feeling like a lethal trap. Every instinct screamed to hurl it against the wall, to confront my son, to let it all explode. But I stayed composed. I gave Marcus a look that said I understood, accompanied by a small, almost imperceptible nod. That was all he needed. He adjusted his cap, then quietly disappeared back into the shadows of the restaurant. My mind raced, connecting dots that should have been obvious years ago. Kevin's impatience, his frequent queries about my will, the way he got so irritated whenever I talked about living for another couple of decades. This wasn't just about money. It was something much deeper. He wanted more than just my fortune. He wanted me gone. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. The son I had raised and loved was trying to kill me for my inheritance. The thought was so horrifying, it left me momentarily breathless. But the harsh reality was unavoidable. The $58 million wasn't a windfall. It was a death sentence. At that moment, the song ended. Kevin and Brenda returned to the table, laughing and looking perfectly normal, as if everything was just fine. My son, with a smile plastered on his face, had just tried to poison me and acted like nothing happened. Inside me, the cold fear hardened into something else, an unyielding resolve. As they sat down, I put on an Oscar-worthy act. Holding my stomach, I let out a small groan. Brenda joked about my terrible acting skills. Kevin laughed, but I shook my head, forcing a strained look. "No, it's not pretend," I croaked in a weak voice. "My stomach's bothering me, something chronic. I think I need to go home." Brenda's face filled with overly dramatic concern. "Oh no, Jack. Do you need a doctor? We can drive you." I waved her off, making sure to sound dismissive. This was a critical moment. I couldn't allow them to come with me. "It'll be okay. I just need to rest. I've already called an Uber. It's waiting outside." Kevin stood up to help me. His hand on my arm felt like a brand. "Are you sure, Dad? It's no trouble at all." "I'm sure," I replied firmly. As I balanced myself against the table, my hand brushed against the glass of cranberry juice. Acting like it was accidental, I knocked it over, watching its redness stain the white tablecloth like spilled blood. "Oh, clumsy me," I muttered. While they focused on flagging down a waiter, I quickly grabbed the napkin soaked with juice. It was heavy and wet, and I stealthily slipped it into my coat pocket. It was the only evidence I had, my sole proof of the grim truth. Without lingering for another word, I turned and left, moving as quickly as I could on unsteady legs. I didn't look back, not wanting to see the victorious expressions I knew would appear on their faces. About 15 minutes later, I was in the back of an Uber, watching the city's neon lights blur past the window. My fingers gripped the damp napkin deep in my pocket. The strong cranberry scent filled the air. I wasn't angry yet, nor was I sad, though I knew those emotions would catch up with me eventually. For now, I felt a stark, icy clarity. They had set a trap for me that night. But with this evidence in hand, it was clear they were the ones who would ultimately be caught. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. The Uber dropped me off a few blocks from home, disappearing into the night traffic as I started walking. For a split second, I found myself standing beneath the orange halo of the streetlight, the soggy napkin weighing heavy in my jacket pocket. My home was just a little further down the road, its glowing windows offering a welcoming light in the midst of night. But stepping through the door right now meant surrender, letting the deep sadness and jolt waiting within swallow me up. I wasn't about to let that happen. Mourning was a luxury I simply couldn't spend. What I required was some solid answers. So, I turned away from the serene, familiar streets, opting instead for the sharp, distant lights of the city center. The night pulse there was another beast entirely. Sirens wailed somewhere out there, and that constant city buzz matched exactly what I was feeling inside. I was after the cold, hard reality of facts, not the messy swamp of love and betrayal. There was a spot I knew, a low-key lab tucked away in a medical building. It was the sort of 24-hour place favored by the well-to-do who valued speed and discretion. Our company, Callahan Logistics, had used their services before for doing employee drug screens. Through the automatic doors, I stepped into a lobby filled with a ringing silence and a certain chill. The air smelled sharply of antiseptic and ozone. A young guy sat behind a glass partition, the glow of his computer screen highlighting his face. He glanced up, his expression unreadable. I produced the damp napkin, now enclosed in a plastic bag I'd fished out from a trash can, and slid it over through the drawer. "I need a complete toxicology report on this," I stated, keeping my tone cool and firm. "I want every detail, organic, inorganic, and it has to be done tonight. Cost isn't an issue." He nodded, pulled the drawer back, and examined the sample with an unhurried professionalism, his fingers tapping away at the keyboard. "Priority 1 tox screening is going to cost you, sir," he warned. "Just do it," I shot back, offering my credit card. After processing it, he handed me a form to fill out with my contact info for when the results, due in 3 to 4 hours, were ready. I scrawled my private email, pushed the form back, and headed out. The sterile waiting room wasn't comforting. I needed to walk, to clear my head. A couple of blocks away, I stumbled into a 24-hour diner, a joint that seemed frozen in time. I ordered a black coffee I had no intention of drinking, and nestled by the window, untangling my jumbled thoughts with the same rational mindset that helped me build my business. Instinct told me to ring up the police, report what happened. But I immediately tossed that notion. Reporting it would mean creating a public record. The story would hit the media, splashing headlines everywhere. Logistics big shot, Jack Callahan poisoned by his own son. My reputation, my business, the legacy, all tainted by one ultimate act of betrayal. Alicia's memory dragged through the mud. It would all morph into a media circus, feeding the tabloids. No, this wasn't a problem to be solved in courtrooms or through prison sentences. This felt more like managing a nasty personal dilemma, akin to surgically removing a cancerous growth rather than just slapping on handcuffs. I began to think back to all the signs I missed over the years. Kevin as a kid had this knack for lying easily, all innocence on the surface, like the time he shattered our neighbor's window and pointed the finger at another kid, sticking to his version of events even when the truth emerged. As a teen, he was always borrowing things without returning them, and generally showed no regard for others' property or emotions. I chalked it all up to being careless or just a phase of immaturity, convinced he would eventually grow out of it. Alicia saw it differently and tried to warn me. I was guilelessly hopeful, blissfully ignorant of the full picture. Yet now, the realization of that small vial hit me hard. Marcus, the security guard, specifically mentioned this little vial. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing, driven by some sudden burst of anger. No, it was premeditated. My son, my only kid, had made the effort to learn about my medical conditions. He'd tracked down this particular poison, brought it specifically to a dinner, and waited for the right moment to turn a celebration into something deadly. He toasted me, feigned a smile, all while knowing he'd just dosed my drink. It was that iciness, the complete lack of humanity, that scared me deeply. My phone buzzed, jolting me from my thoughts. An email popped up, just a string of digits, a case file ID. My heart raced as I tapped to open the secure file. The document was full of technical jargon, but thankfully there was a simple English summary for folks like me. As I skimmed through, it spelled out that the substance detected was metoprolol tartrate, concentration 2,500 millimoles per 100 millimol. Never heard of it, but I kept reading. The tech team explained metoprolol is a beta blocker typically given for heart issues, with normal dosages between 25 and 100 milliliters. What they'd found was way overboard, especially risky for anyone with heart troubles. Taking that much could trigger a severe heart attack in a few hours, resembling a natural death. A heart attack. That's what it would have looked like. I pictured a son mourning amid the seemingly normal death of an older businessman. The setup was meticulous, almost too perfect. I closed my phone, realizing my coffee had chilled. Part of me clung to the hope it was all a misunderstanding or a terrible prank. But those hopes sank under the cold, hard facts glaring from the screen. This document felt like an early death certificate, a bullet dodged for now. As dawn inched closer outside the window, I wasn't angry. Anger and rage felt too wild, too turbulent. What I had was a cold calm, the kind you get when all uncertainties strip away, leaving harsh truth behind. My son had plotted to end my life, and now the next step was clear. No more mourning for the son I once had. It was time to confront the man he's become. I grabbed my phone again, bypassed 911, and called my lawyer, Cynthia Walsh. It was time to rally my defenses. Leaving the diner, the city was just stirring awake, the night sky fading into shades of purple. I felt distant from the day breaking, yet my mind buzzed with a steady resolve. My steps were purposeful, each breath precise. I knew who I needed to lean on, the sole ally I trusted to guide me through the chaos. At a quiet street corner, I dialed her private number from memory. It rang just twice. "Walsh," came her voice, crisp and alert despite the hour. "Cynthia, it's Jack. I need to see you now." No hesitation, no grogginess on her end. Her voice was devoid of confusion, just ready acceptance. "My office in 30 minutes. She hung up, no more words needed. Her office was high up on the 40th floor of a sleek glass and steel skyscraper, offering a sweeping view of the city. When I got there, the place felt ghostly, with only a lone security guard in the lobby. The private elevator, just as arranged, accepted my keycard. It opened directly into her office, bypassing any reception area. She was there by the expansive window, outlined against the growing daylight, nursing a half-filled coffee. Cynthia Walsh was in her late 40s, with her father's piercing gaze and one of the quickest minds I've ever met. Her dad, David, was my best friend and partner back when we were building our empire. She grew up in front of my eyes, from a kid with pigtails to a sharp-witted legal eagle. She aced the bar exam and, upon David's passing, seamlessly stepped into his role as my legal advisor, confidant, and pretty much the daughter I never had. We were family, forged by shared history and rock-solid trust. "Jack," she said, turning to me with those sharp, assessing eyes, "you look like you've been through hell." "The battle's just starting," I replied, jumping right to the point. I sank into one of the leather chairs at her massive mahogany desk and started unraveling everything for her. I jumped into the tense dinner, filled with awkward small talk and fake grins. I shared what the security guard had said, and it all felt unsettling once more. Then, I slid my phone over to show her the lab report that was open on the screen. She picked up the phone, her face turning serious as she read the sharp words staring back at her. After putting it down gently, her hands gripped the edge of the desk tightly. Our eyes met, and I saw both the fierce anger of a lawyer and the deep rage of someone personally affected. "That bastard," she muttered, every word dripping with venom. "He crossed a line." She stood and started pacing, looking ready to burst with energy. "First move, we call the district attorney. I'll get him up myself. We'll have Kevin in cuffs before sunrise. Attempted murder, premeditated. With this lab report and the guard's statement, it's a done deal." I put up a hand to stop her. "No." She paused mid-pace, locking eyes with me. "No, Jack. He tried to kill you." "And then what?" I said quietly but firmly. "Headlines everywhere. A media circus of a trial. Months, maybe years, while the Callahan name is trashed. Everything I've worked for, everything Alicia and I built, turns into a cheap crime story. My legacy becomes my son, the killer. Is that winning, Cynthia?" She fell silent, considering my words. She understood. This wasn't just about the law, it was about true justice. "So, what's your plan?" she asked, her voice softening. "This isn't revenge. I want a shift, a permanent change in the fabric of things. Prison is a cop-out. He doesn't deserve that. I want to take away what he was willing to kill for, all the money. I want him to wake up and realize the world he thought was his is gone." Cynthia's face slowly spread into a cunning grin, one that reminded me of her dad when he was about to outwit someone. "Got it," she said. "This isn't just a court battle, this is destruction. Okay, Jack, if we're doing this, it'll be my way. We need more than just this report, a complete overview. We need to know every penny owed, every friend they have, every skeleton hiding in their closets. We need to map out their whole lives to know exactly where to hit." She went over to her laptop with fresh intent. "I know a company, ex-FBI and IRS folks. They're invisible, thrive on this kind of game. They could probably tell us Brenda's toothpaste from across town. I'll get a team on this before the night's over, digging into everything about Kevin and Brenda. We'll have—" Error. Connection interrupted. A complete dossier on their finances and lives within a week. I nodded in agreement. "Good. While they're doing that, I'll step into my role." Cynthia raised a questioning eyebrow. "The role they expect," I clarified. "The grieving father, seemingly oblivious. I'll let them think their plan nearly succeeded, that I had a minor health issue and that's all. To trap them in carelessness, they've got to feel safe and think they're still on track for the prize." I told her about the call I was waiting for from Kevin and how I'd set things up. Mentioned I was establishing a big family trust. I'm going to let them believe that's where my focus is. I'll dangle the inheritance right within their reach. Cynthia's smile widened. Let their greed trip them up, a classic move that never fails. Her eyes drifted to a photo on her shelf. It showed her, a beaming teen, between me and her father on a fishing boat. "Dad always said you were a better poker player than he was," she reminisced softly. Said you knew when to hold, when to fold, and when to go all in. I glanced at the picture, and a wave of loss hit me. David would have known exactly what to do. He always said, "You were the smarter one out of us all." And he was right. I remember when I was about 10, Cynthia continued, her gaze going distant. You and Dad were in our living room with the blueprints for your first big warehouse spread out on the floor. You both were so excited. And I recall seeing Kevin. He must have been around 12 off in a corner. He wasn't paying attention but was just methodically snapping the arms off some action figure out of boredom. We left that bit of our past hanging in the room, a small, unnoticed warning we had all overlooked. "All right," Cynthia said, snapping back to the now. "Here's the plan." "We're ready," she said, leaning over her computer with her fingers zipping at lightning speed on the keys. "Phase 1 is all about gathering intel. Phase 2 is where we set the trap. You just keep them calm and distracted. I'll take care of everything else." I stepped away, moving to the window, where the sun peaked boldly on the horizon with a striking orange hue. Down below, the city was shaking off sleep, millions of lights fading as sunlight took center stage. Yet, I didn't feel any joy or satisfaction, just a heavy sense of mission. My son had unwittingly declared war the moment he tainted my drink with poison. But here we were, high up on the 40th floor, his father and his god-sister setting the plans that would bring him down. Today, the sun was rising on what would be the first of many days in his new reality, completely oblivious that it was already game over for him. I didn't have to wait long for the next move. The next morning, cradling a mug of black coffee in my study, my phone gave a gentle buzz. Kevin's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring 4 times, a deliberate pause to hide the fact that I'd been waiting for this call with absolute certainty. Finally, I answered, tweaking my voice just a bit to sound slightly weary, slightly fragile. "Hello," I said, my voice softer than usual. "Dad, thank goodness you answered." Kevin's voice oozed with fake concern. He was doing a remarkable job, I had to admit. He sounded breathless, in a panic. "Brenda and I were up all night, worried sick. We kept calling, but it just went to voicemail. Are you okay? What happened? Did you go to the hospital?" His flurry of questions was less about caring for my well-being and more about fishing for clues. He needed to know whether his scheme failed or if it had been caught. He was hunting for any whiff of suspicion. Leaning back in my chair that groaned softly, I geared up to give him exactly what he wanted to hear. "Easy, son. I'm fine." I chuckled softly, waving off his anxiety. "Just a bit of a scare, that's all. Saw my doctor this morning." I paused, knowing he was hanging on to every word. "Said it's just indigestion. All those rich foods, the sauces. You know my stomach doesn't handle them like it used to. Tests showed my heart's perfectly fine." I could almost sense his relief, a quiet exhale. The anxiety in his voice dropped away. He wasn't listening to my actual words. He was listening for the absence of suspicion, and he found it. The story fit. It was easy to believe. It made him look innocent. "Indigestion? Are you sure that's all?" He checked, nudging one last time for assurance. "You left so quickly. You look so pale." "The doctor is sure, and so am I," I said, adding a touch of finality to my tone. "It's not the well-oiled machine it once was, Kevin, just something I need to get used to." I sighed, a long, practiced sound meant to echo a man pondering his mortality, a man beginning to think about his legacy. This was it, the perfect setup. "You know, son," I started, my voice a bit softer, more thoughtful. "Last night's little incident really got me thinking. At my age, you realize time isn't a given. We need to get things in order." "What do you mean, Dad?" he asked, with a new sharpness in his tone. The pretend worry vanished, replaced by keen curiosity. Letting a pause linger as if collecting my thoughts, I continued. I had a call with Cynthia Walsh this morning. I name-dropped deliberately. Mentioning my attorney would lend my next words serious weight. We talked about my estate. That big sale, $58 million, it changes things, complicates things, right? Yeah, of course, Kevin replied eagerly, his anticipation clearly noticeable. And I've decided, I said, presenting the bait with casual finesse, to set up a large family trust, a very generous one. I want to make sure you and Brenda are taken care of well. I want this money to benefit our family for generations, not become a burden. As we spoke, Cynthia was already drafting the papers. I waited. The line was dead quiet for about 5 seconds. You could just sense the wheels spinning in his head, like you could almost feel the greed start to cloud everything else, every worry, every fear, even after he failed to finish me off. The anxiety and the narrow miss faded away, giving way to the shiny lure of a rock-solid, legally guaranteed payout. A trust fund, he eventually mumbled, his voice barely hiding his thrill. Dad, that's unreal. You don't have to do that. We're totally okay. His protest was so half-hearted, I almost wanted to laugh. It was the kind of polite refusal you give when you've just been handed the world. And there it was. He swallowed the bait, hook, line, and sinker. Don't be silly, I replied, acting like the kind old father. You're my only child. Who else would I do this for? This is my legacy, making sure you're set. That's what matters to me now. I'm speechless, he said. And for the first time, I think he really meant it. His mind was so caught up in dollar signs, he couldn't piece together a single thought. He was already spending the money, living in the future he was once ready to kill for. A future he now thought was just being handed to him. Don't say anything, I told him gently. Just stay close. Cynthia will have you and Brenda come in to sign some initial paperwork in a week or so. We'll talk more then. Right now, I need some rest. This old man's more worn out than he realized. Sure thing, Dad. Rest up and thank you. Really, thank you. I put the phone down softly on the desk, and the study filled with silence again. Looking at the blank screen, I saw my faint reflection staring back. I didn't feel happy or victorious, just a kind of cold satisfaction. The act had worked. His own greed had been used against him perfectly. Now he was eager and totally on board with my plan. He felt secure. He felt like a winner. He'd be scrambling for a pen to sign, not peering into dark corners for threats. I'd bought us some time. Time for Cynthia's team to dig. Time for me to set up the ideal, inescapable trap. The game was now on my terms, with my rules, and he had no clue he was already checkmated. A week rolled by. It was a week where I kept my head down, going through each day with a calm, almost meditative focus. Kevin's calls came in daily, full of a sugary, fake warmth. He checked on my health, my appetite, my chats with Cynthia. Each question was a gentle probe, ensuring his golden ticket was still intact. I played the part of the pleased father, enjoying this sudden gush of attention, not noticing the current ready to drag him under. I told him Cynthia was working on the details, that these things take a bit of time. And he waited patiently. Of course he did. What's another week's wait when you think a $58 million jackpot is at the end of it? While I kept him fed on calm reassurances, Cynthia's team was diving deep into my son's life, like sharks in deep waters. On the 8th day, an email from Cynthia landed in my inbox. One word in the subject line: report. The email was empty, except for a heavily encrypted PDF file. I opened it, and the quiet peace I'd built around myself turned to a hard, cold knot of disgust deep inside. It wasn't just numbers on paper. It was a look into a chaotic life full of reckless desperation. It started with a summary that knocked the wind right out of me. Total unsecured debt, $750,000. This massive sum was scattered across an overwhelming number of credit cards, each one maxed out to its max limit. Cards with names promising prestige, American Express Centurion, Visa Black. I flipped through the detailed statements. It read like the wish list of someone living in a fantasy. Luxury hotels in the Caribbean, a $10,000 shopping spree at a high-end Milan boutique, a single dinner in New York that cost more than the first car I ever bought. It was a lifestyle of champagne dreams and caviar nights, built on dreams that were as fragile as plastic and promises that crumbled like dry leaves. But that was only the start of the story. I continued to read on, learning they were driving cars they'd only rented for an image they couldn't maintain, a Porsche Cayenne for her, a BMW M5 for him. With sky-high monthly payments, they were already behind by 3 months. The warnings were piling up, and it was only getting worse. They lived in this grand house within a gated, affluent neighborhood, the epitome of suburban dreams. And that house? I helped make it happen, gifting them the down payment as a wedding present, thinking they'd create a life, maybe start a family there. But it turned out they'd taken a second mortgage on this house 2 years ago, a house they'd drained dry, and were now 3 months late on their payments. Foreclosure was knocking at their door. Worse still, those investigators revealed a string of personal loans with sky-high interest rates, not from banks, but from private lenders, the kind who don't send gentle reminders when you miss your payments. Another $500,000 in these loans, all part of a messy attempt to patch over older debts. They were treading water in a sea of debts. When I finally looked at the total, it was mind-boggling. Kevin and Brenda, my well-to-do son and his charming wife, were drowning, more than $2 million under. They weren't just spending more than they earned, they were living in a completely different reality, kept afloat by lies and leveraged risks. Reeling from the numbers, suddenly the attempted murder, the poison, and the chilling plan came into sharp, horrifying focus. I initially thought it was pure greed, simple, ugly greed to speed up an inheritance and live lavishly. But I had it wrong. This wasn't to fund some dream, it was to escape a real-life nightmare. That $58 million wasn't a windfall, it was a rope they desperately needed to climb out from under their collapsing world. With foreclosure looming, cars about to be repossessed, and the shadowy debt collectors circling, they stood on the brink of total ruin. They needed my money, not out of greed, but from sheer terror, like animals pushed to the edge, ready to do whatever it took to survive. The truth hit me, ice cold and heavy. This wasn't a rash crime or obsession, it was cold, calculated finance. For them, wiping out $2 million in debt and tapping into millions more was worth the risk of getting caught. To them, my life had boiled down to a spreadsheet figure, and they decided it was time to cash it in. Reviewing that dossier again, with its list of fancy restaurants, designer wear, exotic trips, painted a picture of a hollow life, a show for nobody. Their dream home balanced precariously on the edge, and a storm was brewing. The anger that simmered within me now was of a different kind. It wasn't just the betrayal that stung, it was a rational, icy fury. My son had not only plotted against his father, he'd taken every gift, every ounce of love, and twisted it into a weapon against me. My generosity had bankrolled the lifestyle that now imperiled him, leading him to view my death as his salvation. I shut the file, the first piece of the puzzle in place. Now, I fully grasped their motive, not just emotionally, but with the clarity and harshness that the spreadsheets provided. It was uglier than I ever imagined. I passed the email on to Cynthia with straightforward instructions. The foundation is rotten. Keep digging. If the first report had felt like a punch to the gut, the update that arrived 4 days later cut deeper, straight to the heart. In those intervening days, I'd stewed in my cold anger, grappling with the enormity of my son's financial downfall. I thought I had it all figured out. I thought I'd reached the bottom. But I was only beginning to understand. Oh man, I thought I'd seen the worst of it, but boy was I wrong. There were depths of betrayal I hadn't even considered yet. I got another email from Cynthia, labeled simply as Update. Curious, I clicked on the attachment. It wasn't the usual spreadsheet of debts this time. It was a bunch of field notes, interview summaries, and transcripts from recordings. The investigative team had been digging into what Kevin and Brenda had been up to, trying to piece together how they planned to use money they seemed so sure was coming their way. My eyes skimmed over names of swanky art galleries in New York, Boston, and Chicago, leaving me baffled. What's this got to do with anything? And then I spotted it. Brenda Callahan's name popped out at me. I started reading a phone transcript that one of the investigators had recorded, legally, by pretending to be someone from a gallery. Brenda's voice was described as smooth and refined, with a serious tone that seemed well practiced. "Yes, I'm Brenda Callahan," the transcript began. "My father-in-law is Jack Callahan," she'd say, before pausing to let the legacy of the name sink in, along with all the wealth it hinted at. "Unfortunately, Jack isn't doing well. He's on his way out, and we're trying our best to sort out his affairs. It's a tough time for us as a family." My hands trembled. On his way out? She was talking like I was already gone. The transcript went on. "Alicia, my late mother-in-law, truly loved collecting art. There's this small but really important collection of post-war American pieces she left behind. Jack," referring to me, "asked me to take care of finding a new home for them quietly. He's not interested in the hoopla of big auctions or the fees, wants it all kept private, ensures her legacy gets into good hands." I had to pause there. I pushed myself away from the desk, walking over to the wall of my study. There hung our very first painting. It was a modest landscape by a young, not yet famous artist we'd stumbled upon at a street fair. We didn't have the cash for it then, not really. Paid it off bit by bit. I can still recall the joy in Alicia's eyes the day we brought it home into our tiny apartment. "There," she said, hanging it up. "That's our window to the world we're going to create." I let my gaze wander over to another piece, a big, wild mash of vibrant blue and searing orange. A canvas she picked up the week she was told she was cancer-free for the first time after her grueling battle. "This is what recovery feels like," she whispered to me, her hand nestled in mine. A dazzling, overwhelming, wonderful chaos. Each piece on these walls was a chapter from our life together. It wasn't about investment or assets. These were Alicia's essence, captured in the colors and textures. She didn't just accumulate art, she kept feelings, all those highs and lows, victories and heartaches. Her spirit was woven into the brushstrokes and hues. Reluctantly, I went back to the desk and forced myself to continue with the report. It said Brenda had snapped high-resolution shots of the paintings with her phone during those times she came over to visit, supposedly to check on me, bringing soup, fluffing pillows, asking about my health, pouring on that fake concern. All this time, she was just scoping the place out, taking inventory of my wife's soul to auction off. The investigators swung by one of those galleries, too. An owner remembered his chat with Brenda, saying, "She mentioned her father-in-law wasn't going to be around much longer." The report quoted her as claiming ownership of the collection and wanted a baseline value for the estate. She was insistent on absolute secrecy until, as she put it, the inevitable happens. The inevitable, meaning my passing. I shut my eyes tight. I imagined Kevin and Brenda in our home, their eyes roaming the walls, blind to the memories, the love, and Alicia. All they saw were dollar signs. They saw a lifetime of passion in front of them, and thought it could quickly solve their credit card problems. My wife's legacy wasn't her memory to them. It was just the price tag for a Porsche's down payment. When they tried to take my life, it was really all about my money. I was starting to piece together this ultimate betrayal in my mind. But there was an added layer. This was a desecration like no other. It wasn't just about ending my life. It was about completely erasing my wife's memory, cashing in her essence. And then there was Kevin, my son. He just stood by, watching this happen, letting his wife, that vulture in designer gear, prey on his own mother's legacy. He had a hand in every lie and every whisper about my questionable health. This went beyond betrayal and reached a level of depravity I couldn't have imagined. He wasn't just picking my pockets. He was reaching into his mom's grave. I had felt a cold, analytical anger about their debt before. Now it was a burning rage. This wasn't a game of chess anymore. This was war. The $58 million wasn't the point. It was just money, just paper. But Alicia's collection, that was something sacred. They had the nerve to violate it. I looked at the last painting she ever bought, an ethereal seascape that hung across from my desk. She used to sit there, hours on end, taking it in. "It's so peaceful, Jack," she'd say. "Feels like coming home." My determination became like tempered steel. I wasn't the same guy anymore, no longer the dad in the diner mourning his lost son. The part of me that hoped for an explanation or some path to redemption for Kevin vanished. You can't save a soul that's already been traded. I called Cynthia. She picked up on the first ring. "I got the report," I told her, my voice different now, stripped of old weakness, resonating with the sound of the man who had built an empire from nothing. A voice I hadn't used for years. She started with, "Jack, I'm so sorry." "Don't be," I interrupted her. "Get ready. I'm done gathering intelligence. No more games. I don't want to just correct them, Cynthia. I want to build a wall of consequences so impenetrable that they'll never see daylight again." I was set on erasing them. I thought my anger over Alicia's desecrated memory was the final stage of this. I thought my resolve couldn't harden anymore. But I was wrong. A final report from Cynthia's team would turn my anger from a burning inferno into something else, solid, cold, unbreakable. It came the next day. The subject line simply read, "Final Report." I opened it. The first page was a high-quality scan of a legal document, a medical power of attorney, with total authority granted to one Kevin Callahan over all my medical records and life decisions for me, Jack Callahan. My signature was at the bottom, that familiar, confident stroke of ink, except it wasn't mine. I've penned my name on countless documents, contracts worth millions, birthday cards, you name it. I know every loop, every edge, each subtle flaw. This signature was a forgery, expertly done, enough to fool any hospital clerk or admin not looking for deceit, but a lie nonetheless. Never, not even in my worst nightmares, would I have considered giving my son that kind of control over my existence. The investigator's notes below the scan were brief and unnerving. The document had been sitting in my primary hospital's records for 3 months. 3 months. This was no impulsive act. This was a meticulously crafted plan, laid out well before the company sale was even complete. Months had been spent setting this up. As I read further, the extent of his plan became clear. Investigators had gotten the hospital's access logs. The report logged every file Kevin had pulled up and accessed using that forged paper. My whole cardiac history, the full rundown of my latest stress tests, a detailed list of my prescriptions, doses, and their known side effects, even my recorded allergies. I had everything figured out. They had mapped out all the weak spots in my body like it was a military operation. But those digging into all this didn't stop there. They traced every digital breadcrumb. The last part of the report didn't just surprise me, it crushed me. The browsing history pieced together from disposable phones and computers at public libraries, and every trail led back to my son. The list of searches wasn't fancy, just a bullet-point timeline plotting a murder plan. It was all there. How do you get a parent's medical records? Quick-acting drugs to trigger a heart attack. Over-the-counter tasteless beta blockers. What dose of metoprolol's deadly for an older dude with heart issues? How do you stage a natural death? Does an autopsy catch a metoprolol overdose? I read it once, twice, then again. The words stayed there on the page, a harsh, inescapable truth. It's what tied everything together. The fake paperwork was how he got the intel. His internet searches showed he meant business, and the lab results from the restaurant sealed the deal. I slumped back, realizing for the first time how twisted his actions really were. This wasn't just a money grab by an uncaring son. It was a cold, calculated operation, meticulously planned. He studied my medical records like a general eyeing an enemy map, zeroing in on where to attack. Killing me was an equation, a problem he intended to solve with a scientist's cold precision. I was just a troublesome factor he needed to solve. That's what hit the hardest. He'd taken my most private health info, the stuff doctors use to keep me alive, and turned it into a weapon. A total violation of the parent-child bond. The son who's supposed to look after you morphs into the killer in the story. All my feelings for him, all the memories of the child he was, turned to dust right then and there. What faced me wasn't my kid anymore, just a plotting, heartless threat who saw his father not as family, but as an obstacle. The emotional connection, the bond that had tied us together for 40 years, was cut, definitely and permanently. The anger I'd felt was replaced by something much colder, a feeling more alarming, a steady, emotionless certainty. No more questions, no more hesitations, just the road ahead, and it demanded action, not investigation. I grabbed my phone. I didn't have to think twice about who to call. I dialed up Cynthia, and she answered in a flash, her voice already charged with anger. "You see what I'm looking at?" she barked, barely containing her anger. "I see it," I replied, calm and collected, like when I'm about to seal a big deal or win a bet. "We've got everything locked and ready. Now, how do we play it, Jack?" "It's time to call the shots," I told her. "Reserve the main meeting room for next Tuesday and send out a notice for the formal signing of the Callahan Family Trust. Make sure everyone knows it's a celebration." I took a second to gaze out the window at the clear blue sky. Just like reading a will, but this time I'd be handing my son the cold, hard truth of the situation. Finally, when meeting day came, everything was cast under a gloomy gray sky. I was standing by the window in Cynthia's meeting room, perched on the 40th floor, looking down at the ant-like cars buzzing about the city, completely unaware of the huge showdown about to go down above their heads. The room was designed to scream power, a massive, smooth mahogany table that could double as a mirror, and 12 high-backed leather chairs like a team of silent, daunting soldiers. This wasn't your cozy living room discussion, but a place for making or breaking destinies. Cynthia and I had spent the last hour in prep mode, not needing to say much because, well, what more was there to say? Everything was ready, every paper checked and double-checked. In front of her sat 5 thick blue folders, neat and precise, which to someone else might seem like normal legal docs, but to us, they were no less than a well-armed arsenal. She made slight tweaks, lining them up with exactness like a surgeon preparing for major surgery. Right on the dot at 10 das, the door swung open, and in strode Kevin and Brenda, exuding a triumphant vibe that seemed a bit too lively for our calm and serious gathering. They were dressed as if they were about to walk a red carpet, Kevin in a suit that looked like it had just been unwrapped, and Brenda in a dress so bright it seemed to shout against the room's muted tones. They carried an energy that screamed victory like they had just bagged a long-fought win. "Dad!" Kevin called out, his smile so broad it seemed to stretch uncomfortably. He marched over and gave me a hug, the first one he'd initiated in 20 years. I stood there, stiff, my arms hanging by my sides, enduring the awkward squeeze. It felt weird, like being embraced by a stranger, his touch making my skin prickle. He smelled strongly of expensive cologne and, somehow, of his own ambition. Brenda trailed behind him, planting a kiss on my cheek. "Jack, you're looking great," she chirped, eyes alight. "Looks like a bit of downtime did wonders." Her gaze darted past me, landing on the stack of folders on the table. For a blink, I saw pure greed flash in her eyes. It vanished almost immediately, but I caught it. Their greeting to Cynthia was casual, bordering on dismissive. "Nice to see you, Cynthia," Kevin said as he scoped out a seat. To them, she was just the hired gun, the legal expert orchestrating their anticipated windfall. They had no idea she was engineering the setup for their unraveling. They perched across the table, looking like a couple who'd just hit the jackpot in a glossy magazine spread. Beaming almost non-stop, Brenda let her eyes flicker between me and the folders on the table. Kevin reclined in his chair, exuding a laid-back authority as if the entire room, table, and future fortune were already his. He rubbed his hands together eagerly. "Here we are finally, the signing of the Callahan Family Trust," he proclaimed. "Has a nice ring to it, don't you think, darling?" he asked, to which Brenda replied softly, nearly breathless. "It sounds like a legacy." I watched them like a scientist examining something curious under a microscope, noting their expressions, body language, and the glint in their eyes as they pictured a future tied to my demise, a future that was pure fantasy. A calmness washed over me. I felt profoundly detached, like I was outside looking in. I was committing this moment to memory, savoring this closing scene of their blissful ignorance. It was the last time I could quietly enjoy their misplaced confidence. Cynthia shuffled on without missing a step. "What's happening, Cynthia?" Kevin faltered, his earlier confidence starting to slip. "Mr. Callahan," Cynthia began, her tone steady and unyielding. "Today's meeting is about addressing some matters that need sorting before any signatures go down." The shift in the room was as tangible as the air before a storm. Kevin shot a look at Brenda, his assured demeanor beginning to crack. Brenda seemed like she was attempting to assemble a puzzle while caught in a whirlwind. Her mouth opened just as if to object, but Cynthia continued unrelentingly. "Your father suspects you've been thinking about selling parts of his art collection, despite having no legal right to do that." Her eyes moved between them, daring them to deny it. Kevin's shoulders tensed, and Brenda looked rattled, her brain racing to make sense of the accusations falling heavily on them. The excitement they wore like armor had been peeled away, replaced by an avalanche of fear and doubt. Cynthia paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "The lab reports, your financial records, and the call log, they don't paint a pretty picture." The reality crashed into Kevin and Brenda, their hopes for a smooth inheritance crumbling like sandcastles beneath a wave. Kevin ran a hand through his hair, desperately trying to hold on to the illusion of control. "Is this a misunderstanding?" he asked, clinging to a thread of composure, but his voice was tinged with uncertainty. Cynthia shook her head slightly. "The evidence is pretty damning, Mr. Callahan." Brenda's voice, just a whisper now, broke the tension. "Kevin, is this true?" Kevin couldn't even look at her, turning away to stare blankly at the incriminating documents laid out in front of them, realizing there was no quick escape from the trap he'd set for himself. Kevin stared at his wife, his face a mix of disbelief and anger. He knew about the financial trouble, but this was something else entirely, something she'd hidden away. Cynthia then finally spoke up, adding another layer to this disaster by revealing the last folder she had, filled with damning evidence. Inside, there was a forged power of attorney from Northwood General Hospital, dated a few months ago, plus internet searches logged on burner phones for things like lethal doses, metoprolol, and how to fake a natural death. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. No one dared to breathe, the silence as thick as a fog in a graveyard. Kevin and Brenda were no longer themselves. They were reduced to statues, petrified by fear. They had been celebrating their future just minutes ago, now watching it crumble away. Brenda finally found her voice, although it came out shaky and weak. "This can't be right, I didn't—" But I interrupted, keeping my voice calm yet heavy, filling the room even more than the silence had. "Kevin, there is no family trust." Those words hit like a sledgehammer, extinguishing any flicker of hope they might have had. Cynthia took over seamlessly. "Your father's correct," she said, "all business. There is no trust left because the entire $58 million has been redirected." She let it sink in for a moment. Every penny is now secured in a new irrevocable trust, the Elysia Callahan Foundation. Cynthia made it clear, every word as precise as a laser. The foundation's purpose is to support budding artists and wildlife causes, your mother's passions. She looked between the two of them. All papers were signed last week. Everything's locked down tight. You have no access. There's no money to touch. Brenda let out a small, broken sound while Kevin sat, his world shattered. I laid out their future, speaking in a steady, no-nonsense manner. You have two choices. These are the only routes available, so pay attention. For choice one, I continued, we end this here. Cynthia contacts the DA, hands over all this evidence. You will face charges of conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder. There's no escaping a conviction. Prison will be your reality for a long, long time. Say goodbye to your old lives. I left that image to form in their minds. The cuffs, the bleak cell walls. Or, I said, there's a second route. Cynthia pushed a hefty document towards them with a pen. Sign this. It's ironclad. Signing means you give up any claim to my estate or your mother's. This house, now paid off and held by a company under the foundation, will also be transferred. You'll leave with just a suitcase each and be out of my life for good. In return, I finished, I won't file charges. This stack of evidence, I gestured, will remain locked away. Violate this deal, and I take it to the authorities. You'll have your freedom and nothing else. A chance to start over, with nothing in your pockets. Cynthia and I fell silent, leaving the ball in their court. The pen lay there, untouched. They faced a decision between two bleak futures, and words were unnecessary. They knew what had to be done. Waiting for them to act felt like an eternity. When my son, his hand tremoring slightly, finally picked up the pen, he didn't bother to read through the papers. He just scribbled his name where Cynthia directed. A name that once stood so firmly, now scrawled in a dispirited hand. Once he finished, he passed the paperwork to Brenda. Her silent tears fell onto the paper, smudging the ink as she also signed away everything. They got up, moving mechanically. They avoided eye contact with me, probably incapable of even trying. Exiting the room, they left behind their greed, their ambitions, and every plan they held for the future. The door closed with a heavy thud. The silence that followed was profound. Yet, I felt no victory, only the heavy sadness of a necessary ending. So, here's the scoop. That stuff all went down about 3 months back. Since then, seasons have switched up a couple of times, and I'm no longer in my big, echoey residence. Instead, I'm chilling in this cozy yet bustling downtown art gallery. The air is thick with the scent of fresh paint and the buzz of endless possibilities. The walls, totally decked out with these vibrant, bold artworks. They're creations by emerging artists chasing their dreams, all thanks to the first-ever exhibition backed by the Elysia Callahan Foundation. Right next to me is this young woman. Her hands are smeared with paint, and she's got this fiery energy in her eyes. She's chatting about her work, a wild swirl of colors that takes me back to memories of my wife. As I'm hearing her out, really getting into it, I notice I'm smiling. It's one of those genuine smiles that lights up your whole face, and though it feels kinda odd, it's also strangely comforting. I used to think leaving a legacy meant handing down money or property, a baton of sorts to pass to the next in line. My entire life was all about setting up something solid for my son. But now I get it. I was way off. A true legacy isn't about what you leave for your family. It's about what you do for your community, those opportunities you open up, and the kindness you pay forward that keeps growing even when folks have forgotten your name. By not giving my son the money he didn't earn himself, I handed him something my wealth couldn't buy, the shot to carve out his own path. A life shaped by effort and honesty, not just a free ride. What he does with this opportunity is up to him. The story he writes from here on out is all his. But here's the kicker. We took the mess that came from his greed and flipped it. We turned a son's betrayal into an artist's debut. We swapped out bitterness for creativity, converting a missed inheritance into real chances for people I've never even met. This way, I'm keeping my wife's memory alive more than I ever could by selling her art collection. I'm breathing life into her spirit, not by keeping it locked up in a silent house, but by fueling the dreams of others. I didn't find peace through revenge.